Welcome, everyone, and good morning. It's wonderful to see you. It's like looking out there at the sun, and then I walk in here and look what I see. Welcome to members, welcome to friends, welcome to guests and visitors, and if you just wandered in, we are glad to have you all. Welcome especially to our speaker this morning, Carol Flake. I'll introduce her a little more thoroughly in a moment, but she is, of course, one of our own, and chances are you know her. And I'm Vanessa Cowie, today's worship associate. This is our annual women's service, and some elements of the service will look different today, not to mention people in the service. We are asking that you please share joys and sorrows before the actual service begins by writing them on the cards provided here on the altar table, and then feel free to bring them forward anytime from now through the opening hymn, and they will all be voiced by Jan in the prayer later in the service. So if you please. And they will also be relayed to Loving Hearts Helping Hands and to Reverend Bob after the service. So just a couple of announcements. Our vibrant women's group, the Women of UUTC, meets on the first and third Wednesday of each month from 1:30 to 3 here at the church. And please join for connection, fun, and inspiration. And if you have questions, speak to Janice Cannon. Get ready to participate in We've Only Just Begun, the UUTC's spring auction. If you didn't manage to see the welcome table out in the social hall, then please visit it after the service and make sure that you are all set to participate fully in the auction fund. Before we begin today, I want to acknowledge that our recorded music today is by Voces Aged, sung by Janice Cannon and Elaine Shaver, and our live piano music is by Carlene Reagan. Thanks, Carlene. Now our guest speaker. Dr. Carol Flake is Distinguished Professor Emerita from the University of South Carolina. At USC, she taught courses in human development and family relations and earned an additional degree in religion and culture with specialties in feminist theology and women's spirituality. During her 22 years of refirement, she has pursued an in-depth study of Jungian psychology and dream work, recently focusing on the work of Anne Baring, Jungian analyst and author of The Dream of the Cosmos. Carol is actively involved in UUTC, leading a dream group and co-facilitating the Spiritual Explorers. Now it's time for our congregational greeting, just in case you haven't greeted anyone since you arrived. But for the sake of continuity of today's service, we're asking that you remain seated and recognize each other's worth and dignity from your chair today. We're going to sing our opening today. Our opening words are our opening hymn, Let It Be a Dance.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you, through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance, let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with singing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you, through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A time for the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you, through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, there's nothing right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, share the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
After the dance, I have to find my glasses. Our chalice lighting words are from Selena Fox, a psychotherapist, teacher, writer, photographer, and priestess. And let's say these words in unison with love for mothers and for mothers. We kindle this flame with love for mothers and for mothers, past, present, and future. We kindle this flame in celebration of community and its generations. We kindle this flame with respect and support for the greater circle of life of which we are all part. Hi, guys. It's time for the words of wisdom. And today, we're going to be talking in this space about what happens when girls and women make their voices heard. Not necessarily by talking louder, but although that's sometimes important, isn't it? But by knowing what hard things they want to do and doing them. What does that mean? Well, throughout history, there have been many times that girls and women in particular were told to be quiet. For example, in many schools in the United States, going back to the 1800s and before, which really isn't all that long ago, trust me, girls were either not allowed to go to school with boys, or if they were allowed to go to school with boys, they were not allowed to speak in the class. They might write papers and not be able to read their papers out to the rest of the class. So it's good for all of us when girls and women finally have been able to go to school and to do work they think is important. And I'm going to tell you about just one woman's story. She's going to show up on the screen here shortly. In 1892, people who got a disease called leprosy were often sent off to one of the Hawaiian islands, and they'd stay there until they died because there was no cure. They could be injected with oil from the chalmugra tree, and there's the fruit and some leaves from that tree that originally grew in India, but it also grew in Hawaii. So sometimes they would get injections from that tree, but the oil was so sticky that it wouldn't be absorbed by the whole body. It would just kind of stay under the skin, and so it didn't help the people get better. Alice Augusta Ball is in the picture here. She was the first woman and the first African American to graduate from the College of Hawaii with a master's degree. Now, do you think it was easy to be the first woman, right, and the first African American, perhaps the only, at least at times, and to be studying pharmaceutical chemistry? That's what she did. Alice researched plant medicines, including chalmugra oil. She invented a way to get into the chemistry of the oil and modify esters in it so that it could be injected and absorbed by the body, and it could help cure people with leprosy. Sadly, she died not long afterward, not from leprosy, but she was only 24 years old. Her graduate advisor that she had worked with took all the credit for her technique. He named it the Dean method. His name was Arthur Dean. He never said it was Alice Ball who actually did the work. But years later, researchers discovered that the technique really was the Ball method. Alice Ball's invention had already saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Now her voice, her story, can really be heard. And thank you for listening. And now I think Katie is going to light our chalice for the kids. So come forward, Katie.
Good morning. In our service this morning, Sleeping Beauty Awakens, we ask that you suspend any images you have in your head of something you've seen in a Disney movie, because we ain't it. Instead, we're going to explore how awareness and wakefulness, the two main components of consciousness, combined with bravery, have moved us forward in evolution. The wholeness and power of brave women have contributed to this evolution by their willingness to think and move outside the box of strict social norms. This can easily be seen by those women who have participated in movements to resist the status quo, such as the suffragettes who were seeking equality within the established system. Far more commonplace, however, are the women who have spoken up and acted in their homes and communities from their hearts to raise compassion, lower judgments, helping and creating acceptance for all humans and animals. They've done this with sometimes dire consequences. Still, they persisted. They raised their children from the heart with ever-increasing consciousness, bringing us to a crossroads, which you will hear more about in Carol's sermon this morning. I'll read you the following poem that has been erroneously attributed to Jack Kerouac. It was actually written by John Chapman. Who is that? Johnny Appleseed. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can praise them, disagree with them, quote them, disbelieve them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They invent, they imagine, they heal, they explore, they create, they inspire, they push the human race forward. Maybe they have to be crazy. How else can you look at an empty canvas and see a work of art? Or sit in silence and hear a song that's never been written? Or gaze at a red planet and see a laboratory on wheels? While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. We will see some of our very own crazy, untamed women in our first video this morning. And you can see you have a few up here too. The video is entitled Savage Daughter. One of the definitions of the word savage is found in Merriam-Webster, and it's untamed. Come, let us worship together.
I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. I am my mother's savage daughter. I will not cut my hair, I will not lower my voice. My mother's child is a savage. She looks for her omens in the colors of stones, in the faces of cats, in the fall of feathers, and the dancing of fire, and the curve of old bones. I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. I am my mother's savage daughter. I will not cut my hair, I will not lower my voice. My mother's child dances in darkness and sings heathen songs by the light of the moon, and watches the stars and renames the planets, and dreams she can reach them with a song and a broom. I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. I am my mother's savage daughter. I'll not cut my hair, I will not lower my voice. We are all brought forth out of darkness and water into this world through blood and through pain, and deep in our bones the old songs are wakening, so sing them with voices of thunder and rain. We are our mother's savage daughters, the ones who run barefoot, cursing sharp stones. We are our mother's savage daughters. We will not cut our hair, we will not lower our voice. We are our mother's savage daughters, the ones
I was just frozen by that wonderful performance. Thank you for the video work, Jan. Shortly, the ushers will pass baskets around collecting the treasure you share with UUTC and our charitable partner for April, the Children's Center. But the baskets hold much more than your paper and metal treasure. They are containers for our dreams. Our acts of service embody our dream of a world in which we all dance toward our individual spiritual fulfillment, of a world in which all children and other people are safe, sheltered, secure, and treated with dignity and fairness. May it be so. Thank you for your gifts, for your generosity.
We'll take a few minutes for a moment of prayer. From the power of our united UUTC community, we extend our heart to those who have sought recognition today. For Alice Hardy, who has a joyful thank you to this congregation for helping to support the Children's Center each April. She says she speaks for the entire board of directors when you are thanked for your continued generosity. A sorrow this morning is from Vanessa Cowie. Sorrow for the passing of Ruth May, an infant grandniece of Ian and Vanessa's. We are here for you and feel our presence and our caring. For joys or sorrows that are unspoken, we are here for you. For the health of the earth and for future generations, we continue to nurture the health of the earth.
in gratitude for the brave women throughout the centuries and in this present day who have used their hearts and wills to further the evolution of human consciousness. We celebrate these women and hold them in gratitude for remaining open and persevering despite obstacles, scorn, and sometimes danger. For ordinary people, including you and me, who are rising to the occasion and bringing the best that is in us as best we can, we give thanks. We will now take a moment of silence. May it be so. Amen.
I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she rules her own body? What happens when she sets the beat? What happens when she bows to nobody? What happens when she stands on her own 2 feet? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? Oh, we rise above. Oh, we lead with love. Oh, we have won. We are one. We've just begun. Whoa, we rise above. We lead with love. We have won. We are one. We've just begun. What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens when she wears the crown?
This is a reading from a book by Anne Baring, The Dream of the Cosmos. For nearly 4,000 years, the soul has lain under a spell. Her voice has been silenced, her wisdom rejected. Beauty, grace, and harmony have faded from our world, but now she is stirring to life within the soul of humanity. What does she want from us? What is her hope? I believe she wants relationship. I see this relationship as a sacred marriage, a marriage between ourselves and the deep, invisible ground of life. The soul and the feminine archetype, in their deepest sense, have always carried the values of the heart, the values that honor wisdom, justice, and compassion, and the desire to help and heal.
I've never had the courage before to use my iPad. Thank you, Reverend Bob, for being a good role model. I do have a copy under here. I don't always trust technology. I want to thank everybody who participated in the creation of this women's service. The women, the photographers, the tech people, the owners of Happy Hollow, where we danced, the worship team, my friends who read this sermon and blended their voices in with mine, and especially Janice Cannon, who created the beautiful musical montages. And thank you, Carlene, for your piano music, too. And especially, I already said especially Janice, our service today is truly a community creation. Janice is always giving me these really difficult opportunities here, challenging opportunities. Last year for our women's service, she asked me, she said, where does the light come from? I'm going, give me a break. I'd have to have a PhD in physics to answer that question. But I did it. This year, she asked me to review 40,000 years of her story, women's story. Her story. His story, history, reviews the story of the masculine. Her story is the largely untold story of the history and evolution of the feminine. In this context, the word feminine stands for a totally different perspective on life. It really doesn't matter what body you happen to be in. The feminine offers us a different perspective on life, a totally different worldview than the one we see these days. We desperately need the feeling values of love and compassion, caring and nurturing, and other wisdom from the women folk to support our emerging worldview. And the feminine stands for awakening to a new planetary consciousness and the challenging and critical work of creating a new civilization. One of my Celtic wisdom teachers, John Philip Newell, warns us in his latest book, the consequences of not remembering the sacredness of the earth and the human soul are disastrous, both individually and collectively. Fortunately, yesterday was Earth Day, so our sermon today, our service is both earth and women. So he says the consequences of not remembering the sacredness of the earth and the human soul are disastrous, both individually and collectively. The earth is alive. She is sacred. Her name is Gaia in the Greek, Pachamama in South America, and Mother Nature in the world of advertising and consuming. Today we are exploring the feminine perspective on our necessary global mind change. We do not live in a dead, meaningless universe, but within a sacred cosmic order. We live in a post-pandemic world, and for the last 50 years or so, we have been experiencing the collapse and dissolution of our old mythologies, our old belief systems, our old political systems, which have resulted in dividing rather than uniting our human family. My great teacher, Anne Baring, wise woman, says that the myth to guide us in this current times, I mean, she's a Jungian analyst, right? They got to have a myth. We can remember that, those of us who were here when our Ernie Mills was here, Minister Emeritus. He schooled all of us in Jungian psychology, whether we wanted it or not. It's been very useful for me, however, and Anne Baring is a Jungian analyst, so she's got a myth, right? Okay, the Sleeping Beauty has actually been around since 1300. Those days, her story was told orally to adults. They were stories for adults. Back before, there's a book called The Language of the Goddess. They used to tell stories to each other rather than analyze everything rationally, okay? It was told to adults. And then later, it was kind of gentled up a little bit and started being told to children. So therefore, the story's been around, the myth has been around and all since 1300. And it was only recently that Disney adopted it and did their Disney thing, which I appreciate, actually. This myth shows us selfless love and the feeling of oneness that we each desire on the deepest level. This is a mythical story of our higher love. We Unitarian Universalists have often rejected the word soul since we can't see it. We can't measure it. But it is true, however, that we can see the soul in action in the millions of women who love and care for our children and our elderly, and in the medical profession who cared for us when we were sick. We can also see the soullessness of many of our so-called masculine world leaders. The Sleeping Beauty is about the recovery of the soul and its awakening in the prince and the princess. Somewhere, if you've ever been to Chartres Cathedral, they got a lot of stuff in there. A lot of women's stuff in there, a lot of the Green Man and a lot of female figurines. But one of the things it has is a sign that says, carving that says, "It's now time to awaken the beauty within, the sleeping beauty." This sleeping dimension is the soul, the feminine. It lives deep within our hearts. It lives within women and within men and within all life. This beauty is awakening now that it is time. My initiation into the feminine values and feminism began in a curriculum that we Unitarian Universalists offered for women, and we might still offer it, I don't know. It was entitled, Cakes for the Queen of Heaven. In this curriculum, small groups of women studied the ancient traditions of the divine feminine. We shared covered dish dinners, we danced together, much like we did here at the beginning of the service, and we came to know each other from the very depths of our souls. We created a women's spirit celebration that's still offered at the mountain. We were offering it twice a year, but you can go online, Women's Spirit, and find access to that. They even have online discussions of books. So it's Women's Spirit at the UU Learning Center at the mountain. Well, I actually have about 40,000 years of herstory to cover today before Sleeping Beauty can awaken, so fasten your seatbelts. I'm using some images and metaphors and musical montages to help guide us through her story. And my first image is the Venus of Willendorf. There she is. She was uncovered in 1908 in Austria. She had lain underground for 25,000 years. The stone she is made of is actually not from that area of Austria. So she has to have been transported there by some human migration. The idea is that women were probably gathering together in enclaves or something. Probably the whole group gathered. Well, anyway, this Venus, I'm letting her represent 35,000 years. of the worship of the feminine during what Anne Baring calls the lunar era. During that era, the traditional rituals in the Western world, I'm not talking about India, China, I'm talking about the Western world here, old Europe, Greece, that area. Okay, no, well, this is mainly, the Celtic tradition really is preserved in Scotland and Ireland and other places in Europe. Okay, so at any case, in those days, the traditional rituals were cyclical. They were based on the patterns of the moon, which moves from the new moon to the crescent moon to the full moon, back to the crescent moon, back to the new moon, cyclical. The periods, these cycles govern everything, from women's menstrual cycles to her periods of gestation, to seasonal planting and harvesting. They all were clearly marked with celebrations in the old religions. And it even went from life to death and back again because of the spring. You know, you have the death of the winter and the spring of the rebirth. Later on used in Christianity with the resurrection of Jesus. I'm sorry, Janice, I wasn't supposed to go that way. I can't help but tie all this stuff together, folks. I'm just sorry, I can't. Okay, it's true though. Okay, so we can see the lunar cycles showing up clearly in the continuing Celtic spirituality of Scotland, Ireland, and Europe. Goddess figures such as the Venus of Willendorf, the Queen of Heaven, Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, Inanna. That was a chant we used to always do when we did women's circles. Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, Inanna. Okay, the next one is Gaia, the divine feminine. Sophia, she is called by many names. Today I have a display of the goddesses I collected when I was really into this. She's called by many names. After 35,000 years of the great goddess in Western culture, Sleeping Beauty has now been asleep for about 4,000 years. We could see the beginnings of this long slumber when the priest of the first temple in Jerusalem banished the worship of Asherah. They removed her bronze snake from the temple, and they warned against her worship. His story, as recorded in the Jewish Bible, reveals that the prophet Jeremiah commanded the women to quit baking. This is actually in the Bible, I found it. Jeremiah 14, thereabouts. Anyway, here's what he said. He commanded the women to quit baking those cakes for the Queen of Heaven. And it turns out that when he said this, he was down in Egypt blaming the women that the Jewish people had been exiled. And here's what the women said. This is her story, okay? Are you kidding? It was when we stopped baking those cakes for the Queen of Heaven that all this trouble started. It's not in the Bible. Okay. Anne Baring told me, now I don't know where she got it, but she's pretty smart, so she probably found it somewhere. This story of Jeremiah is the basis for the Cakes of the Queen of Heaven curriculum. Much later, her story reveals that the Holy Roman Empire burned countless wise women at the stake for practicing the old religions in which women were honored as herbalists, healers, and midwives. Do you know at the beginning today when Vanessa did the words of wisdom that young lady was an herbalist who then got trained in pharmaceuticals, and she was able to transform her knowledge, and she never got credit. It didn't show up in his story, showed up in her story, fortunately. So therefore, Vanessa told us the story. All of these women were tortured as witches, condemned by the Inquisition, and they died horrible deaths. The priests of the Catholic Church, of course, took all of their land and possessions as a price for their heresy. So who do you think got condemned as witches? It was the wise old women, because they had land and they didn't have family. It was a convenient way to increase the coffers of the church. Now back to Sleeping Beauty. In this next image of the sacred marriage, we're waiting for the next, oh, thank you all, good. In this next image of the sacred marriage comes from ancient alchemical texts. The prince has traveled many miles in search of the Sleeping Beauty, her. It has been rumored that she is asleep in a great stone castle surrounded by thorns. Many men have tried to cut through this hedge of thorns, and they failed. But it was foretold that the right prince would be able to cut through the hedge and find the beauty sleeping within. When the current prince shows up, he finds a hedge of yellow roses. He easily cuts through the branches, finds the Sleeping Beauty within. He recognizes her. He honors her. He has found his lost soul at last. With his gentle kiss, he awakens the Sleeping Beauty. When she awakens, everything changes. The prince is awakened. He's found his lost soul. Sleeping Beauty is also awakened. Turns out that we modern women are actually not hanging around waiting to be rescued by a prince. You can see in our music and dance that we have gotten pretty powerful. We have already awakened to the strength, courage, and love that resides deep within us. Well, in my own experience, it is true that being kissed by a so-called prince has usually caused me to wake up, at least for a while. Finally, I did develop the discernment to stop kissing frogs, wishing they would turn into princes. Like Anne Baring, I see this magical story, The Sleeping Beauty, as a metaphor for our time and the urgent need for a marriage between our head and our heart, a marriage between our solar, rational thinking and our lunar, instinctual feeling. I also see it as a metaphor for the reconciliation of spirit and soul, or the union of the masculine and feminine aspects of our true selves. In living and studying I was living this movement, but I didn't know it at the time. You know, I was at the University of South Carolina in 1978, and I was at the College of Education, you know, so there were a fair number of women there, but I didn't realize, you know, women were just barely breaking into getting their doctorates at that time and starting to show up. So in studying and living the women's movement over the years, I began to realize that after we were imprisoned in the boxes constructed by the patriarchy and their religions, we wanted to be free and we wanted to be powerful. But we really didn't see any roots to power and breaking the glass ceiling except through the ways that men were doing things. So a lot of us, I say I lost my soul. My friend says she didn't lose her soul, but it was because I had come up here, and by the time she came along, she didn't lose her soul while she was at a university setting. So, you know, different ways for different people. I think I will have a swallow of this water. Anyway, we wanted to break out of these boxes we were confined to, and we didn't really do it gracefully in every case. We felt like savage daughters. Thank you, Jean. Amen. That was called an amen right there. We didn't do it gracefully. We felt like savage daughters. We wanted to break free and become powerful. The musical montages at the beginning of the service represent our anger as we got out in the woods together and sang and danced and said, man, we're tired of this. We're going to take our power. Unfortunately, we did have to pursue power in a man's way because they were in charge of all the institutions we were in, most of us. Many of us found that we had lost or diminished our own souls. My soul felt like it was filled with splinters. In fact, I actually did a lot of body therapy in my quest, and I would actually think of a splinter and pull it out. So I was able to embody the pulling out of the splinters from my soul once I identified them. And we went to sleep to the true feminine values that had been suppressed in our quest for power in a male world. Okay, fast forward. At a Canadian peace conference in 2009, we got the Dalai Lama, who said that the world will be saved, he said, by Western women. Everybody's pretty shocked about that, but Gloria Steinem then observed that women grow more radical with age. She predicted that one day an army of gray-haired women may quietly take over the earth. And that is us, okay? Clarissa, I'm reminded of Ernie now, who said, well, I've got 18 pages of here, and I'm going to stay with it until I finish. We've got a few more minutes, though. If Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves. I love it. Anyway, here's what she says. If you have not yet been called an incorrigible, defiant woman, don't worry, because there's still time. And you men can join us as you recognize and awaken to your own feminine nature as your own soul awakens, reawakens. As you continue to live the soulful journey of the sacred masculine. As a student of Carl Jung's depth psychology, I'm very aware that each woman has a masculine side and each man has a feminine side. Men and women must rise up together, rooted in an ethic of community, compassion, and creativity. Carl Jung showed us how to move to these deeper layers of the psyche. He believed that the future of humanity depends upon the reawakening of our souls. So my next image shows a monarch butterfly just emerging from her chrysalis. This butterfly metaphor is very popular these days with modern depth psychologists who are following in Jung's footsteps. Depth psychology is not about behavior, it is about the soul. And the evolution of the soul can be traced metaphorically as the transformation of the monarch butterfly. We have been consuming the earth in gigantic chunks, like the very hungry caterpillar in the children's book. He ate up everything till by the end of the book there was nothing left to eat. When a monarch caterpillar is hatched from an egg, she sits on a milkweed plant and eats and eats and eats and eats and eats until she becomes too large for her skin. Then she forms a chrysalis around herself and dissolves. Her story proclaims that the pandemic forced us all to enter a chrysalis to slow down, to quit being on the go all the time, to spend more time with our children and our pets, to know that our loved ones were dying alone in institutions, to recognize that all life on this planet Earth is being threatened in a multitude of ways. We dissolved into caterpillar soup. This is where we find ourselves today. We have been like caterpillars munching away at Mother Earth's bounty. We are using up her fossil fuels, cutting down her trees in the Amazon, damming her rivers, and much, much more. We are destroying Mother Earth. Like the monarch caterpillar whose only home is the milkweed plant, we are destroying rather than nurturing Gaia. In many of our women's circles over the years, we've shared this chant. The earth is our mother. We must take care of her. The earth is our mother. We must take care of her. Hey ya, oh ya. That's not written down here. It's a little, we always sing it a little bit flat, so for me to sing it a little bit flat is okay. Okay. This is a huge topic, but heaven knows the world needs for us to slow down, go inward, and reemerge, reawaken with less ego, less greed, more beauty in all of its forms, and more compassion for humanity and our beloved Gaia, our Earth Mother. And, well, anyway, I was going to throw in a Buddhist thing here. The wise Buddhist teachers say to us that the next Buddha will be the Sangha, the community. In fact, I think Buddha said that, is reported to have said that. The next Buddha will be the Sangha. It will be the community. That's the Sangha. And that is us, the community, the Sangha. We women at UUTC need to do exactly what we are doing, joining small groups of wise women, such as the women's group on Wednesday afternoons, and you're very welcome to attend that. See Janice. We need to join the small groups for community, and we need to continue creating beautiful blessings for the passing of our loved ones. I'm thinking right now this very instant of John Austin's wife, Linda. When she died, the service was like the soul wide open that day for me. Holding community dinners and pie days, serving as leaders in the various positions we hold, and continue our community volunteering. We need to keep loving our families and our pets and our grandchildren. Hopefully, as we emerge with wings from this caterpillar soup-filled chrysalis, we will be guided by our human imaginal selves, our souls, to live more lightly like a butterfly on this planet and less like a hungry caterpillar. I have to laugh. I remember reading that to children so frequently, the hungry caterpillar. We need to recognize that we must nurture our blue boat home. We will conclude this service with another musical montage as we offer you hope for our awakening, our emergence as cosmic butterflies whose job it is to pollinate the seeds of our global mind change. You feel free to stand and sing or watch and listen once the music stops. Our service in this sanctuary is complete, but our service in the world continues.